Hey, welcome again to the Conservative Caucus podcast. Here's a discussion I had again on the radio the day after the election with my friend Vicki McKenna. I think you're going to find it really interesting what her response is, and also kind of looking forward to where we're going to be going from here. Again, this happened the day after the election, November 6th, and we really would love to have your feedback as we're developing this podcast. Connect with us at theconservativecaucus.org. Leave a message there, anyone you'd like for us to talk to as we're developing the podcast. Your feedback as well would be incredibly helpful. So, and then while you're at our website, make sure that you check out our Citizen Action Center. At the top right of the website, if you sign up there, you'll be able to get into our Citizen Action Center, get into the loop of what we're communicating with people, and have an abundance of training materials that can help you. We respond to Democrats on there as well on our website. There's a lot of great information. So make sure that you go to theconservativecaucus.org. With that, here's my discussion with Vicki McKenna after the election.
Vicki McKenna show here, our election day. You know, I say we don't predict, we don't try to predict, but if you feel like it, Jim Pfaff from the Conservative Caucus, you can dive in. I won't do it. I'm feeling fairly optimistic myself. I don't normally feel that way. So, you know, you look at more than just Wisconsin. I'm kind of just looking at Wisconsin. I hate to ask the question because I don't like it when people ask me, how are you feeling?
So I'm still sticking with 311 to 315 in the electoral vote count. I mean, I feel like he's going to win Madison. I'm just looking objectively at it. And the most
you mean Wisconsin,
polls.
Not Madison.
I mean Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Sorry. Well, you're in Madison. And I love Madison in your show. But anyway, all the recent polls in Wisconsin seem to indicate that trend is in Trump's favor. It's obviously very close and within the margin of error. But nationally, you know, it just seems to me that when I look at the two campaigns and what they're doing and what they're saying and what they're capable of, it seems to me that Trump's got the edge. And here, the closing message, it's vastly different. I look at the fact that you do have a broad coalition of support on Donald Trump's side, and all you have is this narrow leftist Democrat support on Kamala Harris's side. That dynamic seems right to me, and that's why it's on my X profile. My floor is about 286, but I think it could be much more than that.
So interestingly, and we heard this today, Kamala Harris is calling radio stations. She's not calling mine. She's certainly welcome to call mine. We'll clear the deck for her if she'd like to. She's calling radio stations to try to make her pitch in Wisconsin. She's faking door knocking so that she can, I guess, I don't know, seem like she's someone of the people. So on election day, to be doing that as a Democrat says we don't have the early vote in the bag.
They don't. Everywhere that I'm getting information, whatever state it is, wherever it is, I'm not seeing that she has any early vote advantage anywhere. All those numbers seem to be favoring Republicans. Now, again, you know, if those votes could be taken away from Election Day votes, and so people still got to get out. But the way I see it is they have no confidence at all. They do not have the thinking that they're winning this. And you could just look at that by where they focused. You know, they haven't been spending time in states that they can control. They're trying to keep from losing some. So, and by the way, if Kamala Harris wants to make herself out to look like a person of the people, I am sorry. She's been a politician all her life, and she is an arrogant D.C. bureaucrat and who loves Washington power. So don't even try to fool me.
So let's go back to that broad coalition. It's an astonishing coalition. I don't think people have just sort of sat down and appreciated this astonishing coalition. This is a coalition of people who have put aside your typical political differences for securing the basics of American civil liberties. It is odd. Michael Schellenberger, Barry Weiss, Jordan Peterson, he can't vote in the United States, but he would if he could. Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, Ron Paul, Tulsi Gabbard, obviously. So, and I'm using celebrities as placeholders for these groups of people out there that ordinarily you wouldn't think would have much in common. Black people and blue collar people and white people and Hispanic people and Jews and Muslims. And it's just weird.
Well, and it's interesting. I've been talking just from a philosophical standpoint here on that point. I've been talking for years about the fact that there really isn't quite this left-right spectrum in political thinking. It's kind of a little bit more like a half circle or maybe in a full circle where people on the left and right kind of meet in the middle of that curve on the area of civil liberties. And I think that that's why this coalition is so broad because, when you think of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, who endorsed Bernie Sanders, right, for president. So the reason that this is coming together is because our civil liberties really are at stake. People are noticing that. When I've joked around from time to time saying, man, I just long for the day where I've got disagreements with Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi again.
Me too.
Because that's when politics was normal, that graph that Elon always puts out, where he stands at the same place and the left keeps moving so far away from him as well as the center. So that's what we're really dealing with. I do believe that dynamic does play out in this election positively in Donald Trump's favor. Now, anyone listening to me still, get out and vote. You still need to go out there and cast your vote if you haven't. But that is a unique dynamic in American politics. If that center holds, with that coalition being able to work together, even amongst disagreements, it could be a renaissance for America. That's the hope, I believe, of a Trump election.
It's the hope and the promise. It's the hope of the Trump election. It's the promise of the Trump victory. I had a chance to talk to RFK Jr. yesterday, and I asked him about that, because Chris Cuomo had, kind of rolled his eyes and said, hey, you're going to trust Trump. And he says, yeah, I do, because not only has he kept his word, he's gone beyond his word. So here is someone on, and Trump has said this, on the issues of maybe energy, fossil fuels and things like that. He doesn't agree with RFK, but that's not why RFK has joined Trump or why Trump has joined up with RFK. It's about the deep state. It's about throwing Catholics in jail for praying. It's about putting people in prison for protesting. It's about an open border that is completely destroying the civil order of American cities and American rural communities. It's about not letting corporate lobbyists decide what your health policy is going to be. So, there's so many things that are fundamental that are going sideways. That's why blacks and whites and Jews and Muslims and Christians and atheists have come together here, I think, is because, they have recognized we're at a tipping point of whether this country survives as a free nation or not.
Everything you said is absolutely true. But, it brings up to me, there's a very interesting connection to Wisconsin in what's happening this year and what may happen in the future. The first connection is if Wisconsin goes with Trump, then that's going to make a major difference in securing the electoral vote for Donald Trump. There's another way, too, and it's kind of an omissive thing. Paul Ryan will not be Speaker of the House. If there's anything that held back the Donald Trump agenda that was very positive as well after 2016, it is Paul Ryan. It's maybe even not so much all the deep state crap. I was working on Capitol Hill for Thomas Massie at the time. Everything that Donald Trump was trying to do, Paul Ryan was thwarting. And people in his administration were glomming on to that. It would be a fantastic thing to have a Speaker of the House, and I'm no big fan of Mike Johnson as a Speaker, but as a man, he's a great guy. But if he would work really closely with Donald Trump to advance his agenda, that could radically transform in a positive way what this next 4 years is going to mean for America, to get us out of this deep state, bureaucratic, insider approach to shut down American speech and to have a new renaissance of economy and of culture.
And culture.
That could happen. And we got to remember that
I think so.
Today.
You mentioned Paul Ryan, and I think the Paul Ryan model of the GOP, which was post Reince Priebus, and Reince was our chair for a long, long time. Then he joined up with Trump. He was wonderful, by the way. And then we had what essentially were Walker administration people running the GOP. So that sort of the brain, I think, was Paul Ryan. And Paul Ryan has said it out loud. I'm not a culture war guy. He detests Donald Trump. He is a fan of the globalists. And that model of sort of establishment, uniparty GOP had captured Wisconsin for quite some time. I think it hurt us in the assembly elections, in the state senate elections. I think it hurt us in drafting candidates for governor. I think it's part of the reason, the sort of ossification of the GOP in Wisconsin. I think it's part of the reason we lost the Supreme Court. I think it's part of the reason why we lost the governor's seat. And I call it sort of the Paul Ryan model of the GOP, which a lot of the sort of establishment GOP people in Wisconsin were willing to go along with because it was easy, it was polite, it didn't rock the boat. And I think that's over.
Oh, listen, that kind of politics is over for sure. I have this book I've never written, but I did a brief podcast with the title of Against Nice. Listen, for people who are believing Christians out there, there's no command to be nice at all. We are to be kind. It's not like we're supposed to be a-holes to everybody, but there is no reason, and particularly in politics, to be nice about anything. And you're right in what you said with Paul Ryan on that. But here's another interesting aspect of this, just to feed off the Paul Ryan thing. We talked about this coalition that Donald Trump has behind him, but there's one aspect of it, that which is not part of that coalition anymore, that has gone over to Democrats that's very significant. And that's Dick Cheney and probably George W. Bush, although he hadn't said anything. And, you know, the whole John McCain, Bob Dole, George H.W. Bush wing of the party that, you know, you got people saying, yeah, no, Donald Trump's not like Ronald Reagan. No, he's actually reasserting the Reagan coalition once more. The actual idea that war is not good. Ronald Reagan hated war. He was a hawk in the sense of fighting the Soviet Empire. But Peter Schweitzer has a great book, and I interviewed him on the radio, and it made us friends so many years ago, and we're so close friends. Reagan's War. He documented how Ronald Reagan tried to win the Cold War without firing a bullet. It was his intent. It was his belief. That's consistent with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He cut taxes. That's consistent with Donald Trump. He massively cut regulation. Donald Trump massively cut regulation. What has betrayed us over all these years, that is that annoying problem that you described with the Wisconsin State Party, is what we've had with the National State Party, and that is a leaving the foundation of Ronald Reagan from the moment George H.W. Bush was elected president to now, Mitt Romney included, that has totally befuddled any idea of advancing a conservative ideal. $35 trillion in debt later, it's time to make that change, and I think Donald Trump will do that.
You're talking about the neocon wing of the party. They can go. That's Kamala Harris wants to be the war party, turn the former peaceniks of the Democrats into a bunch of, war hungry, war for profit, and adventure, and not for necessity and emergency. That's fine. There's a wonderful book as well. You mentioned the Peter Schweitzer book that actually describes some of the very first meetings when Ronald Reagan became president, and all the people thought it was dumb as they were briefing him on the crisis with the Soviet Union and the situation at hand. And he's listening to a description of global thermonuclear war. And there's a wonderful passage in this book, decided at that moment there was not going to be a global thermal nuclear war because everybody would die. And that was in the very first weeks of his presidency that he had made a decision. We are not going into a war with Russia. If we're going to get rid of communism, it's not going to be with bombs. And to your point, that's Donald Trump in a nutshell.
Yeah, listen, I remember at the end of Reagan's administration, 1984 was my first presidential election as an eligible voter. And I remember I was 11 years old in 1976 in tears when he lost the nomination to Gerald Ford. I'm a Reagan baby in that regard. Ronald Reagan was getting criticism constantly in the last couple of years of his administration as it was clear that the Russian Empire was falling, that he was urgently looking to get treaties with Russia to get rid of nuclear arms. And he was getting neocon criticism at that time in a big way. A lot of people forget this about Ronald Reagan. He hated war. He described himself as a libertarian in an interview with Mike Wallace of 60 Minutes during the 76 election. That was his description of himself. The fact now that you've potentially got Elon Musk and Ron Paul working together to try to cut government, it could be an economic renaissance in this country. Donald Trump's the guy that brought that all together. It wasn't Paul Ryan. And if Paul Ryan and his kind of person were in charge of the Republican Party right now, I can guarantee you our freedoms would be going away because they would be graciously losing this presidential
Yes, Nikki
election,
Haley would be
which
our
is
candidate.
What they always do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's JFK to Ronald Reagan to Trump. You can draw an arrow from JFK to Ronald Reagan to Donald Trump. And we are on the verge of something amazing, something historical, something wonderful, as long as people get out and vote. Jim Pfaff, the Conservative Caucus, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Vicki.
Great to have you as always, and we'll take a quick break.
So before we get to some closing comments on this episode of the podcast, I want to thank you for joining us. It really means a lot to us. I think we've got some good information that can be helpful to you. But of course, we always need your feedback. So make sure you email us at info@theconservativecaucus.org. That's info@theconservativecaucus.org. Check our show notes for any pertinent information that is related to this podcast, any links to relevant things that we're doing right now. And again, as we develop the show over the weeks, we want your feedback. Make sure you go to theconservativecaucus.org. You can also fill out the form there, and make sure you sign up for our Citizen Action Center. You can train yourself and then get a connection to us, so we can help train you to be helpfully effective in your local community, whether it's your state legislature, your local school board. Abundance of information that can be helpful to you. With that, here are some final thoughts with Vicki McKenna.